everybody, welcome back for another Make and Tell Tuesday. Today we're going to be creating this cute project that combines our small terrarium die along with the Pot-Pourri stamp set. We're going to use a masking technique to stamp a whole pile of plants. So let's go ahead and get started. I have already die cut from white cardstock the largest mat or frame from the Crimped Frames die collection. I have also cut one of our small terrarium dies. So to start off with, I'm going to lay out the small terrarium die where I want it to be on my finished project, but I'm not going to adhere that just yet. I'm going to use a pencil to just draw in some guidelines to show me where that terrarium is going to be when we're finished, and that will help guide me as to where I want to do my stamping. So we're going to be stamping a whole, like I said, a whole pile of plants inside of this cute little terrarium, and we'll be using a masking technique. So there we have our pencil lines, and I am going to go ahead and put that die cut panel into my MISTI so that we can use that to do our stamping. I pulled out my coordinating Pot-Pourri dies and die cut the plants that I wanted to use on this project from a lightweight vellum. And I'm using a vellum so that they're going to be easy to lay over the top of my stamped images and so that I can see through them and position them correctly. So we're going to go ahead and start our stamping, and I'm going to start the plants in the front of the terrarium and towards the bottom. I'm going to start with stamping those and work my way backwards, and we'll mask off each additional layer as we go along so that in the end it looks like they're all layered behind each other, which is the whole purpose of masking. So I'm going to start off with this grassy plant right here. I'm not going to be using any of the pots from the set. We're just going to be using the plants. And so they're all two-step images for the most part. And so I'll be stamping this one and then the detail. So I'm going to use my pencil lines as a guide for where to position that. I want some of my plants to kind of look like they're extending outside of that terrarium a little bit, and so we're going to position that so that it's looks like it's coming up out of the base and then also kind of going outside the edge. So I have a whole bunch of green inks. I gathered up all of my Distress Oxide greens, and so we can stamp in all kinds of different shades of green and get lots of nice variety of color. So I'm going to start off by stamping, like I said, that grass, and I'm doing this first layer in crushed olive. I'm going to stamp this detail layer in mowed lawn. Alright, so there's the start for our little garden, and now we're going to want to start masking. So I'm going to take the matching die cut for that plant, and I already put a little bit of repositionable adhesive on the back side of all of these vellum die cuts. And here you can see why that vellum comes in handy, because it lets me lay that right over the top and I can see through it and make sure that it's positioned right where it should be. So now I'm going to go on and I'm going to stamp the next little plant, which is this one, and that is 2 steps as well. And that one almost to me looks like some type of succulent, and so I'm going to be stamping that in more of some grayish green shades. I think I'll be using bundled sage and cracked pistachio. Okay, so that little guy is stamped, and then I'm going to continue on in that same way, now covering that stamped image with my next vellum die cut to use as a mask, and then we'll keep going. Next, I'm going to stamp this plant, which also has this detail. This is the second step. This is the first step, so we'll go ahead and start with the first step, and I'm going to position that over here so that some of those leaves extend out the side of the terrarium. I'm going to stamp that with peeled paint and Lucky Clover. Then we'll continue on. I have my mask for that plant and we'll layer that over the top. Now you can see we're building. I'm getting to the back row now. I think for the next plant, we'll be stamping the cactus from the set. I like to use kind of a grayish green for the cactus, so we'll be using bundled sage and evergreen bough. For the bloom part of the cactus, I'll be using worn lipstick. Then we'll continue masking and add the mask for the cactus. For the next plant, we're going to stamp right up in here in this area. We're going to take this taller plant right here, and the second step for that is this image here. We'll make sure that the base of that is hidden behind some of these other plants in the front. I'm going to be stamping that with mowed lawn and forest moss. We're getting there. Our terrarium is almost full. I want to add just a few more smaller plants around some of the edges and maybe up in here to kind of fill in and finish off the design. So I'm going to go ahead and mask this last large plant that we just stamped. And I think I'll fill in this area back here with this kind of rounded leaf plant right there. And I'm going to stamp that in just a real light yellowy green to kind of act as just something in the background. So I'll be using crushed olive. And then I think we have a couple other bare spots, and this little plant is great for filling in. These two actually are great for filling in smaller areas. So I think I'll be using the larger one, and we'll stamp that up here. And thinking about getting a good mix of color, we're going to go with the more grayish greens this time, again up in that upper area there. So we'll be using bundled sage and pine bough. And I think we'll do one more of those right back here. So now comes the fun part when we get to take off all these little masks and see what our creation looks like. And we can always add them back on and do more stamping if we feel like there's some areas that need to be filled in a little further. But I think that's looking really good, and we're going to leave it like it is. So that's looking really good. I cleaned up my pencil markings from our terrarium, and I'm going to go ahead and just add some shading now to my plants using colored pencils. You can definitely omit this step if you want to make it a little quicker and easier, but I love to add the colored pencil shading. It just really helps to bring the images to life even more, and I find it to be really fun and relaxing. So I finished adding shading with the colored pencils, and I think our plants are all good and ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and add this terrarium over the top. To give that a little grounding, I'm going to take some light gray colored pencils, and I'm just going to add some shading around the base of that terrarium. Alright, so that just helps to ground that and give that a little more weight on the bottom to look like it's actually just kind of sitting there. And so then I'm going to also add some ink blending up around the top of this die cut panel around the terrarium, and I'm using tumbled glass, distress oxide inks, and a blending brush. So I think we just need to add a sentiment, and then our card will be finished. I am going to be using the Sending Sunshine sentiment, which is from the Fresh Air set, And I'm going to position that across the top above the terrarium. And I actually want to curve that so it kind of curves around the terrarium. So I'm going to go ahead and just curve the bottom or the ends of that stamp while it's on my MISTI, and I can check the position if that's good. I think this side needs to come down a little further, so just open that up and adjust that and check that again. And I think that's looking pretty good. So we'll just stamp that in some black ink. We have this super cute panel. I'll add that to a card base, and it's all finished and ready to go in the mail. Well, thanks for joining me, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this week's Make and Tell Tuesday, where we stamped a pile of plants.